In the Unresolved Problems segment tonight, race and the healthcare debate. At a recent town hall, California Democratic Congresswoman Dianne Watson blamed racism for the president's problems with the public.
They are spreading fear, and they're trying to see that the first president who looks like me fails. Did anyone say anything about the Cuban health system? And let me tell you, before you say, oh, it's coming, you need to go down there and see what Fidel Castro put in place. And I want you to know, now, you can think whatever you want to about Fidel Castro, but he was one of the brightest leaders I have ever met.
I don't know which is worse, the Fidel Castro bit or the race bit. Joining us now from New York is Fox News contributor Dr. Mark Lamont Hill, and in L.A., talk radio host, Fox News contributor Tammy Bruce. Dr. Hill, I want to start with you because I saw this Dianne Watson town hall. I did this segment on my radio show yesterday. I thought to myself, this looks so desperate. People who show up at town hall events are speaking out because the president looks like Dianne Watson, i.e. is black? That's so insulting.
Well, I didn't even realize Dianne Watson was black. I don't see race. But I think that the issue here is not whether or not every single person who disagrees with health care is racist, but that there's a racial dimension to this. It would be wrong, it would be unfair, it would be illogical even to say that anybody who disagrees with Barack Obama is racist. There are plenty of white people who disagree with Barack Obama and who are not racist, they just don't like his policies. However, as someone who has talked to many opponents of universal health care, as someone who has been to the town hall meetings, there are many people who are deeply anxiety-ridden because there is an African-American president in office and they do not want to see him succeed.
Who are these people who are deeply anxiety-ridden that an African-American man is president of the United States, and that's why they're going to town hall meetings? I mean, I'd love to interview some of these people on my radio show. I'm sure there are bad apples in every crowd, but the point is, Dr. Hill, they're losing in the court of public opinion, and they're digging themselves further into a hole by going to race. They always go back to the well of race. It always fails them. It's like Charlie Brown in the football once again. I just don't get it. I think it's a losing political tactic.
But that's a different issue. It's one thing to say that it isn't politically wise to talk about race, and I think you're right, because many Americans, particularly white Americans, don't like to talk about race, and particularly don't like to talk about white supremacy and racism.
This is about health care.
But that doesn't mean that it's not true.
Well, it's a bad policy.
Well, people who don't have health care and people who do have health care, they also have a race. They also have a gender. So it's not that we can't talk about race and gender and sexuality and talk about social policy. They're always connected.
Oh, race, gender, sexuality, I'm just, okay. Tammy, I'm going to buy a vowel here because I'm a little confused. This is about health care. This is about the merits of a 1,000-page-plus bill. This is about the public not believing what politicians, and I would say politicians often of both parties, are telling them.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and this is one of the reasons why Barack Obama's lost control of this message, because there has been a focus on things that have nothing to do with what America is rejecting about this bill. They do look to Cuba, and last time I checked, it wasn't Americans getting into boats getting to Havana when they need serious medical care. It was quite the opposite. So as long as Americans are hearing arguments that make no sense, and look, fine, let the liberals make those arguments. In the meantime, independent conservatives have their voices heard. They realize how disconnected the liberal wing and President Obama is in particular with their concerns. I mean, Dianne Watson knows very well via that opening clip. By the way, that audience there at that town hall was captured, that audio exclusively by KABC Radio here. Even when she brought up Castro and when she talked about race, these are primarily older people of color, looked at each other with some concern, and the applause was quite mitigated. So there is a realization overall, and especially for people in her district where there is King Drew Medical Center, they know about the disaster of health care. They know what she has supported in the past, and it finally got closed down. But nobody's fooled by these arguments. We don't like Obama death care because it's going to condemn us into what Canada and what Cuba and what England is going through right now, and it's unacceptable.
But these are nothing but straw arguments. These are straw arguments. And whenever we talk about universal health care, Republicans drag out the 3 Canadians who couldn't get an operation within 6 months. They say that we're going to become Cuba. They start lying about death panels. That's not what this is about. You don't have to be perfect to be useful. We can look to Cuba. We can look to France. We can look to Canada for lessons of how to provide health care.
We can look to Cuba? I don't want to look to Cuba for a mojito at this point, okay? Look to Cuba? Well, this is, I don't understand this. Dr. Hill, you are smart.
I give you points for the mojito.
You come on the show. You're one of the smartest people out there. you know that for the Democrats to win, you guys can't be wearing the Che Guevara T-shirt. That is a loser way to win over independence. You guys are bleeding support, and you're going to Fidel and Che. I don't get it.
You're conflating two arguments. But you're conflating two arguments. On the one hand, you're saying it's not politically wise, but on the other hand, you're saying it's not true.
Stupid. It's stupid, and it's politically unwise. Both things I'm saying.
Well, those are two different issues. We can't confuse the two. I agree with you.
You would want to go.
I agree with you that it's not politically wise.
You would want to go to Cuba. You would want to go to Cuba for an operation. If you had something weird, you couldn't figure out what's going on in your intestines, no one can figure it out in the United States. First place you'd go is to Havana to get treatment.
No, I don't think anyone's saying that, but I also have the luxury of having access to health care. I also have a decent income. And I also have the luxury of having access to a doctor.
Well, that's exactly the point.
But what if you're one of the 50 million people who don't?
That's exactly the point.
But if you're one of the 50 million people who do not, then I'd rather be in Cuba, quite frankly.
May I?
Dr. Hill first,
May I? Thank you.
Very quickly.
What I'm saying is, if I'm one of the 50 million Americans who does not have access to health care, then sure, I'd rather be in Cuba or France or anywhere else where I can get access to a doctor or preventative care before that even. So it's not an issue of having to use Cuba as the template for our health care. We're just saying that there are lessons to be learned from Cuba about providing everyone with access.
Okay, Tammy, take a whack.
The most recent American Medical Association and other government overview of American health, our life is extended. We're living longer than ever before. We are defeating more diseases than ever before. We are the healthiest we've ever been. We are the healthiest in the world. Bottom line, these kinds of policies disenfranchise the disenfranchised. It is people of color, people who live in the inner city, who ask people in New Orleans and FEMA. If you want to create a FEMA for health care for people in the inner city, that's what Obama's arguing for, that's what Dianne Watson's arguing for, and that's what every American rejects, regardless of complexion.
All right. Mark,
I didn't know black people rejected that.
10-second response there.
You may not know this. I'm black, and I happen to be for it. And many black people I know and many poor people I know are for government providing health care.
You're not going to be using it like Congress won't be using it.
You're for it for other people. When we come back, Dick Cheney is out of office, but still manages to get under the skin of top Democrats. So much for a quiet retirement of writing and fly fishing.